I knew I had low self-esteem, and now I had to ask myself, who am I? So I thought I was, okay, I was just there. But I started writing. But the thing is, when you do something that a lot of people don't do, they make you feel like you are a fraud. So even though I was writing, and I wrote numerous books from the time I was 13 to 17, everyone who I would give the book to would crush my spirit, saying, oh, you're a terrible writer, you copied this from another author.
Gosh.
And, I felt like I was a fraud. I was like, oh, wait a minute, but I haven't stolen this from any books, because, I don't really, I never used to really read as a kid.
Today's guest is Vanessa Gowora, a multi-genre author, entrepreneur, content creator, and digital nomad. Vanessa believes in the immense power of finding your way and going after your dreams. When she hit rock bottom at 22, she started asking herself hard questions. A year later, she found out she had ADHD. This led to her finding herself. She later published her first non-fiction book and started a business so that she can help millennials find their purpose. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Vanessa, what is one of the most courageous things that you have done?
That's a good question. When I was in university, I sang on stage. Before that, I was tone deaf, and I helped improve how to sing. But unfortunately, I used to just sing in the shower because I was so scared of singing in front of people. So I was like, okay, well, what's the most terrifying thing I can do in order for me to actually showcase myself and get over my fear? So I was like, okay, I'm going to sing on stage in front of 300 people. So,
on about throwing yourself in the deep end.
Yeah, I was like, there's only one way for me to get over this fear, and I just need to go out there and just do it, because that way, I can just get everything out there. If people boo at me, if I fail, then, oh, well, at least, I'm no longer afraid of singing in front of people.
Absolutely. It's a great attitude to have, yes. How was it? Was everybody happy with the singing?
Well, I would like to say that, yeah, people were, because I practiced for 2 weeks by the teachers in charge. It was a teacher-sponsored event. So they wanted to make sure that the people performing weren't going to get booed off the stage. So for 2 weeks, every time at 5 p.m., we practiced. I knew that song, well by the end of those 2 week period. And, they even got one of the students to actually play the guitar while I sang. When I was actually on the stage, I just kept reminding myself that, okay, listen, I am going to do this. There's no backing away. I already signed up. I can't, it's better I just get it over and done with. So once I did it, people actually clapped, because it was an original song. And now I can say, at least on my bucket list, that's canceled out. I sang in front of people.
Excellent, because that is really courageous. Yeah. I mean, it's terrifying at the same time.
It's very terrifying. Before I actually performed the song, for 20 minutes, I was in the bathroom. and I kept pacing, because I was like, oh my God, I was so nervous. But, I signed myself up for this. So I was like, okay, it's too late. You already signed the paperwork that... so you just gotta go and perform. And even though it was terrifying, I don't regret doing it, because I learned so much from that experience. I grew so much from that experience. I mean, now I can say that I'm no longer afraid of being on a stage, because the most terrifying thing you can ever do is sing in front of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's brilliant. Yeah. So when you hit rock bottom at 22, you started asking yourself hard questions. Yeah. Give me some examples of those questions. What was going through your mind when you really thought, right, you need to dig deep?
Well, okay. I mean, I think I have to give context when, because sometimes people can hit rock bottom in different ways. For me, before 22, I was very... I had low self-esteem. Okay. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. And my dad always used to say that, oh yeah, when he was 22 years old, he didn't know what he wanted. But I was the kind of person that felt like I should know by then. Because before 22, I had numerous dreams. And those dreams didn't pan out because, well, life happens. So, eventually I also forgot about those dreams. And I was like, okay, fine, I just got to move with the program, go to university, get a paper, get a job. And I lived with these people who were very emotionally abusive. At the time, I think they were just being like, we were just all kids, and kids being kids, you know, you do things and you say things, and that was just what I got myself into. But I got really sick and I had to go to the hospital. And people thought I actually tried killing myself, which wasn't the case. Like, my health then was a little wobbly because I have asthma, and on top of that, I wasn't eating the best. So there was a day that I actually forgot to eat. So that was triggered by my ADHD because sometimes I forget to eat. And then on top of that, I had like painkillers because I had a headache because I've been out the whole day. And I didn't realize that, oh, wait, I had forgotten to eat. It might not be the best thing to have painkillers, you know, on an empty stomach. I started feeling sick. I fell down. That triggered my asthma attack. And long story short, it was a very emotionally traumatic experience because the people I was living with thought I was, you know, making things up or trying to get attention, and they became emotionally abusive after that. Gosh. I remember there was a point I just was tired because they thought I was a terrible person, they thought I was a terrible human being, and I started believing that. So when there was one day, I actually thought about taking my own life. I poured the painkillers that I gotten from the clinic into my palm. I looked at them and I was like, okay, now I'm going to end it. But, you know, before I was scared about that because it's a terrifying thought, you know, getting to that point in your life. It's extremely terrifying. So I was like, you know, I'm going to phone my sister, who was the voice of reason in my family. I phoned her, I spoke to her, and we talked about it. I then realized after that I've hit rock bottom. So it took me a while to understand exactly where I was going with my life and what the next steps were. So it was then that I started asking, you know, important questions like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Who am I? What do I do now? You know, what are the next steps for me to go to where I want to go in life? All these things led me down this long path of figuring things out because at that point I thought I knew who I was. I knew I had low self-esteem, but I thought I had an idea. And now I had to ask myself, who am I? Who is Vanessa? What does Vanessa want? You know, do I want to do, like, you know, I was studying hospitality and tourism. I had asked myself, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Do I want to be in a 9-to-5 job? So those are the questions I was asking myself at that point.
That's really touching because, like, from going to wanting to do what you want and then not knowing and then not feeling great and getting the abuse from people not understanding the situation. And that's really courageous of you to manage to come through all that and realize, okay. And I, for one, am so pleased you did ring your sister. And that's brilliant because could be a whole other story. Definitely.
It could have been. And I think sometimes when you reach that point, it's always good to speak to someone because if I had listened to those voices, who knew what would have happened, like you said. But I was like, you know, let me phone my sister because she knows me best. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's always to reach out for help, no matter who it is. There's always someone there you can talk to. Even if it's a stranger, there's someone there that will help you. So that's brilliant. You say you wanted to know what to do with your life, and that when you started doing your writing, how did you become an author?
Well, it's funny. Here's a funny thing. I've been an author since I was 13. My first book that I wrote was about Power Rangers. I was 13 years old. I was bored in boarding school. Before that, I didn't really think I had any talent because I wasn't as athletic or as artistic as my brother and my sister. So I thought I was okay. I was just there. But I started writing. But you know, the thing is, when you do something that a lot of people don't do, they make you feel like you are a fraud. So even though I was writing, and I wrote numerous books from the time I was 13 to 17. Everyone who I would give the book to would crush my spirit, saying, oh, you're a terrible writer. You copy this from another author.
Gosh.
And, you know, I felt like I was a fraud. I was like, oh, wait a minute. But I haven't stolen this from any books because, you know, I never used to really read as a kid. I wanted to be a writer, but I never picked up a book. So, you know, it was one of those things where it was just something I loved doing. And everyone thought I would steal, like I was plagiarizing from other authors. I felt like, okay, you know, if people think that, then maybe I'm a bad writer. No one was telling me I had only one person told me that I was a good writer. Everyone else was saying, why are you writing stories like this? Why don't you write other stories? It was almost as if I didn't have room to breathe when it came to my artistic creativity. So that's the thing. So I've always been a writer. But when I was 22 and going on to 23, I found out I had ADHD. So that's sort of like when everything made sense in my life. I understood why I was a writer. I understood why there were so many things that happened to me in my life, why I struggled reading, why I struggled with school. So everything became a full circle. It was then that I started pursuing it more and more. Before I would write like a story every couple of maybe years. But when I found out I had ADHD, it was every year. And I would just write, improving my technique, finding out how to improve, like reading other authors that I could, I could learn from. And that...
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So that became the training ground I needed, because it's like, okay, I want to be, a fantasy, young adult fantasy or science fiction author. That's when I figured it out. Like, this is what I wanted to do, because I love reading those kind of books. Those are the steps I took. But, when I went through the period of when I was 23 to 26, I was still recovering as well from what I went through when I hit rock bottom. It wasn't like, sometimes we wish that things would switch. Like, you find out who you are and then everything comes into place. But that wasn't the case for me. I started to figure things out. I was still depressed at times. I still had low self-esteem. I still had really no idea. I loved writing, but I didn't know how to make a career of it. So when I was 27, that was when I wrote my nonfiction book. And I published it because I'd gone through all these things. And I wanted to talk more about it, and I didn't think I would be a nonfiction writer. But I was like, what's the point of me going through all the stuff I've gone through if I don't write about it and share what I've learned through?
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was sort of like the steps. And after I published my book, I had like maybe 5-6 people telling me that it was a great book. It wasn't like it wasn't a huge success as I imagined, but it gave me the confidence that I needed to actually pursue writing. And even by that time, I had people in my family tell me it was a terrible book. But it didn't matter, because I had come to this point where I was like, I'm sharing my story. I'm telling people what I've been through. And it no longer became about me. It became about spreading the message and helping people through what I've been through. And telling them, listen, you're not alone. I went through A, B, C, D, and I recovered. You can too.
I love that. That's beautiful. And it is about sharing our stories and helping others. If we can't share our experiences to help others, then what is it about? What is the whole purpose? What is our purpose of being here? And I can totally understand that. And that's quite a journey as well with your writing. I think you've covered this, but I did want to ask you, how did you navigate your ADHD? Like you said, it made sense once you realized. So how was that a process?
It wasn't easy because I didn't have the material that I needed. Like when you discover you've got ADHD at 23, it's so different from when you're a kid. When you're a kid, you go through the whole process, you go to the doctors, they put you on medication. You're given a blueprint of how to actually navigate this thing, because not a lot of people understand ADHD. There's this misconception about it. Some people see it as autism. Now, other people see it as just laziness. I had to figure out a lot. And, at that point, it was difficult because I was doing a lot of it by myself, because my parents would be like, oh, yeah, you've just got ADHD. But you're not in my shoes, Like, it's not that easy to just to get over it. Like a lot of things that I would do, it was a struggle. And I had to read, newspaper articles and books and blog posts and watch videos and truly figure it out. And I even went on Ritalin for one point, and I didn't like how I felt, because I felt like a zombie. I was numb. And I was like, is this what people feel like on this? I was like, okay, this is not for me. And, I just had to find a way of dealing with it. But the way I dealt with it was I just had to accept it for what it was. Just because I had it didn't mean I was broken. Just because I struggled with certain things didn't mean I was a failure. And I had to appreciate my flaws and the mistakes. And when I made a mistake, there was a point where I just had to say to myself, okay, it's a mistake. How do I learn from it? It's fine. you move on. Because one of the things with ADHD is sometimes you overlook things. Like you struggle with attention to detail, which was something that I never thought I had until I discovered I had ADHD, And then I was like, okay, I make a lot of mistakes, but that's okay. I'm not going to beat myself. I'm not going to punish myself for it. I'm just going to learn and improve. So once I accepted myself for everything, including my ADHD, that's, everything just made more sense for me.
Absolutely. And I think that is the point. You've got to accept yourself as you are. And there's a big learning in that, because we're always trying to strive to be something we're not. If you try and think, I need to be like this, I need to be like that, actually, instead of look inwards, come from your true inner essence, who we are, and accept it. And I know that's hard for some people. We're all on a evolving journey as it is. So step by step, day by day. Absolutely.
And the one thing that really helped me, Anita, was my faith. I'm a Christian.
Okay.
And once I started, looking at how God saw me, that made, made everything much easier for me, because I was no longer trying to prove myself to anyone. I just was like, okay, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for, and I don't need to prove myself to the next person. I just need to be.
Yes, absolutely. And that's beautiful. That is really beautiful. Tell me more about being a digital nomad.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this actually started this year. I've always wanted to travel around the world and be a digital nomad. But I was like, okay, where'd I go to? Like, what is the country on my bucket list? And it actually started in me wanting to do this in 2020. But last year, I had a health crisis. I was bitten by a spider. And that affected my nerve endings and my muscles. So for 3 months, I couldn't walk. I could barely move. I had to go to physiotherapist. The physiotherapist suggested I go to a neurologist. And it was just this constant thing of not having my health and having to deal with internal, dialogue that was bad for me, and negative thoughts, and dealing with health crisis. My friend came to the country I'm in right now, Mauritius, last year.
Wow, you're in, listeners, she's in Mauritius.
And, I was like, okay, well, that is a good place to go. And because with what I went through last year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw caution to the wind, because life is precious. Life is short.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't want to always wonder what if. I don't want to always question, if I what would have happened if I took that leap. So this year in March, I was like, you know what? I don't know anything about Mauritius besides what my friend told me. I don't speak the language. I know nothing about the culture. All I know is, here and there, but I don't know nothing. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna. So I packed my bags and I went on this journey, and I've been in this country since, I think it's about 7 months now. And, it's the best thing I ever did for myself, because I was no longer afraid. Because sometimes when we do things, like whether it's moving to a new country, new city, starting something new, there's this fear that holds us back. And I said to myself, I don't want fear to hold me back. I want to experience life. I want to be able to say, that I managed to do so much before I turn 80. I'm sure that, before I turn 80, it's years from now, decades from now. But I was like, I don't want to regret anything. And often, when you reach a certain age, you've got, there's certain things you can't do. You've got kids to worry about. You've got your family to worry about. And I was like, okay, I'm single. I don't have kids. Let me do it. Let me try something out.
Yes.
I just want to experience life so that when I do finally cross a bridge of getting married and having a family, I can say, well, I've done this, I've done that.
And it's a great way to look at life. And, it must be beautiful there in Mauritius. That's somewhere I'd like to go to.
It really is gorgeous. We stay close to the beach. So I can literally take a 5-minute walk to the beach. And, it's a beautiful...
Fantastic.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful experience because I've learned so much. I've done things that I never thought I would ever do, because, like I said, moving to a new country when you don't know a lot of people and you don't know the language and you don't know the culture, it's so terrifying. But when I took that leap,
Yes.
all the things I was afraid of before, they became nullified, because I was like, okay, you know, I'll say an example. I'm an introvert, but you wouldn't think I'm an introvert because I'm talking to you right now.
And plus you did the stage singing.
Yeah, I did the stage singing as well, you know. But, you know, to me, doing this made me less terrified of talking to strangers, of less terrified of being myself. You know, it's strange how, like, sometimes when you take one leap, everything falls into place.
Yes.
Like, all the things you thought you'd never achieve or never do, they start feeling like they're nothing.
It's that ripple effect again, isn't
it? Is
it?
the ripple effect,
And it is one big leap, and you've managed it. You're having a great life. You're having a great moment there, being there. And like you say, the wealth of knowledge you're learning, just being in a different country, is always valued. Always valued.
It is always valued. Yes. And my parents had the travel bug when they were younger, and they sort of like spilled it onto us kids, because they're like, oh, travel broadens the mind. And it truly does, because you start being grateful for all the things in your life, because you go to a new country and there's a totally different atmosphere there, and you start looking you start looking at your life, and you start being grateful for the things that you never used to appreciate, and you start thinking, you know, I need to have this spirit of gratitude.
Oh, and beautiful.
That's one thing that I am having. And even besides gratitude, I'm also experiencing just life and the essence of life, and just enjoying it, and just being grateful for every single day that I step out, because there's so many things, like I was saying, there's so many things I've discovered about myself.
I think that's the great thing. Being away from everything else does give you an opportunity to actually look at your own self, discover yourself, and develop. Absolutely. So how do you help millennials find their purpose in life?
Well, how I help is basically by showing people how to start a business from their passion. You know, I believe that passions will make the world a better place, because sometimes, you know, I was told when I was going into the whole digital space that you need to follow what makes money. And as great as that is, it doesn't work for me because I've always been...
I'm right there beside you.
I'm a passion-centric person. If I don't follow what I want to do, then I give up. There's so many things in my life that I could have easily given up. But because I have a passion for it, I don't give up. And that's just my thing is I show them, okay, your passion is this. How do you make a business from it? And start, you know, like it can be a side business, a full-time business. But I show them the tips and the tricks of how to start a website, write the blog post, find their why, find their brand and image, just design their whole messaging so that it can go out there and set the world ablaze with their passion.
Oh, love that. Yeah. So what resources, I know you've just covered some, so what resources do you recommend, tools, daily tips to anyone that wants to find their purpose in life?
Okay, well, the thing is, it all comes down to what do you love to do? Like, I'm a multi-passionate person. I've got so many passions. There was a point in my life where I was like, okay, I just have to pick one, and then everything else would just be. Eventually, I was like, you know what? The world is full of people going out for these things, so why do I need to limit myself to one passion? I can do all of them. I just need to focus on one now, build it, then start another one, and start another one. For me, it's all about what do you love to do? Thing that you don't mind doing for the rest of your life, even if someone doesn't pay you. That is always first tip.
Key point.
Yeah. The second one is, what is something that comes easier to you than everyone else you know? Something that maybe you thought was nothing, but is actually something. For me, it was writing. Like, people used to complain about writing 2,000-word essay. For me, it was easy. It wasn't even anything difficult. But all have those things that we take for granted because they come easy to us, you know?
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
And the third thing is, what is something that you've learned from your passion that you can teach other people? Because, you know, the goal in mind is to help people. What lessons and tips have you learned throughout your experience or through doing this that you can help someone? For example, some people don't know how to sing. If I want, I could show people how to learn to sing. I taught myself how to sing. Sometimes in life, we want to do something and we take advantage. Well, not take advantage, but we forget that we've learned something and we can use that to help someone else.
Absolutely. Yeah. So where can the listeners find you online, find your books? What's your website?
My website is vanessagowora.com. I've actually got a side hustle guide that they can download that's free. That can help them actually start a side hustle, because one of the things that I tell people is sometimes it's too daunting to start a business. But you can start a side business that you can do maybe an hour, 2 hours per day. And that eventually with time can become a full-time business. Sometimes you just have to take that first step. And the easiest thing to do is, it's not so daunting like starting a full-time business, just start a side hustle and you can make money from that. And someone can easily do one to 2 hours per day working on that side hustle. So that's a free guide. They can also find me on Instagram, Vanessa Gowora.
Brilliant. We'll put all your links in the show notes so people can download that guide too, and the link to your books.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your courageous, inspirational journey with us today. And by doing so, I know you have helped so many others, Vanessa Gowora.
Thank you so much, Anita.
My final question to you is, because we are great, the courage to be fearless. What is your definition of courage?
Wow, that's a good question. My definition of courage is simply stepping out the front door. Because sometimes life, you feel like you are trapped in this box. And, sometimes the first step is just stepping out the door, like whatever you're afraid of. It doesn't need to be grandiose. You don't need to climb a mountain. You don't need to write a book. Sometimes it could be simply quitting that job where that boss doesn't treat you right. So that's why I say it's just simply stepping out the front door. Because when you do that, you realize everything else falls into place. Courage, it all depends on you believing that you can do something and you going out of your comfort zone or out of something that has terrified you, or also having self-worth and believing in yourself.